The 56th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum convenes the foremost leaders from government, business and civil society from the 19th to the 23rd of January 2026. Now, under the theme, A Spirit of Dialogue, Davos 2026 provides an impartial platform to connect leaders to confront shared challenges and drive innovations defining the future. Here is a roundup report from yesterday's coverage at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Let's have a look.
A musical opening for the biggest World Economic Forum ever. Business leaders, heads of state, startup founders, and policymakers descended on the Swiss mountain town of Davos amid tight security, heavy traffic, and a handful of anti-capitalist protesters. The theme this year is A Spirit of Dialogue. At a time of global division and increased nationalism, Davos is where decision makers will get some face time and set the agenda for the coming year. And this year, Nigeria is making its presence felt. Vice President Kashim Shettima cut the ribbon on Nigeria House, a glitzy venue on the Davos promenade.
There is never a better time to be a Nigerian or to be an investor in Nigeria better than now. We have created the enabling environment for businesses to prosper. From day one, as I said earlier, the president took the bullet by withdrawing the subsidy on petroleum.
Nigeria House has a packed schedule of talks, panels, and receptions planned. The message to the world that the government's economic reforms are working and the time is right to invest in Nigeria. The Nigerian delegation will be joined by 850 business leaders and 65 heads of state, including U.S. President Donald Trump and his entourage, who arrive on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the rest of the world will be watching closely to see if all this talk will be turned into action. Rotus Oddiri, Arise News.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to impose 200% tariffs on French wines and champagne after French President Emmanuel Macron was reported to unwilling to join his board of peace in Gaza. Now, when asked for a response about Macron's stance, Trump dismissed the French leader's influence and said he would rather use trade penalties as leverage. Arise Business Correspondent Rotus Oddiri hosted a panel session at the World Economic Forum with the theme, Which 2050 do we want? Now, one of the panelists, Agnes Callamard, Secretary General of Amnesty International UK, said the first 12 months of Donald Trump's second term in office is a perfect example of authoritarianism. Let's have a look.
Spoken about your worries over the spread of authoritarianism across the world, and Zainab was just talking about protests, and we've seen a number of protests flare up in different regions. As we march towards 2050, the protests seem to be matching. Well, I'm going to put that to you. Do you think the protests are matching the spread of authoritarianism, and is authoritarianism essentially, is there a check on it in your view?
Well, authoritarianism is galloping, it's increasing. It's not just an Amnesty International finding, it's a finding of everyone who research human rights, democracy, and so on. Some of the most long-term studies have concluded that right now we're back to 1985 level in terms of how many people in the world live in so-called democracies. So we have lost some count since 1985. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall, all the progress, we've seen a U-turn for people around the world. Authoritarianism is quick. Democracy takes a very long time to be established. Look at the United States, 12 months of Donald Trump in the White House, and it is a playbook of how authoritarian practices get embedded into every institutions, from attacks on freedom of expression, freedom of the media, academic freedom, freedom of association, attacks on dissent, creation of new militarized security forces that are unbounded, the attacks on migrants, on refugees, on trans, on women, all of those things have taken place in 12 months.
A highly insightful panel discussion from the ongoing World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And Arise Business Correspondent Rotus Oddiri joins us live from Davos now to discuss this further. Good morning, Rotus. Riveting panel there, I believe. Of course, we've only seen a compressive version so far. Let's get some more details from you now. Having anchored this discussion, what would you say were some of the most important insights to emerge from this panel?
Good morning, Abby, and good morning to all our viewers around the world. Yeah, so it was a really engaging panel. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. There was a lot of passion, particularly around the topic of authoritarianism and geopolitical headwinds. Even, later on we have a guest from that heads the Global Risks Initiative here at the World Economic Forum, Mark Lisner, and he's going to be talking to us about that. So insight number one is that authoritarianism is on the rise. We had a professor from Columbia University, head of the European Insights, Adam Toones, and he followed our panelist from Amnesty International with an even more passionate response about how authoritarianism is shutting down democracy around the world. And Donald Trump was the main example they kept coming back to over and over. Insight number two was about accountability, Abby, because we talked about misinformation online. We had a tech representative, head of an AI company on that panel, and he got a lot of questions from the audience and from myself and panelists about AI's role in misinformation. And he said, look, this thing is about systems and this thing is about taking accountability. And then another panelist that talked about how, when it comes to fake news, what is it within us, within an individual, outside of their education and their background, that makes them susceptible to imbibing fake news and believing stuff that goes counter to what are facts. So that was also an invigorating discussion there. And then, we also talked about, I guess, the main theme being what is the 2050 we want to see. Pretty much everyone there said, so that's insight number three now. So authoritarianism, accountability, and three, efforts. If you want the 2050 that you want to see, whether you want to see a 2050 where you have only female presidents, or you want a 2050 where everyone has an electric car, or you want a 2050 where there's no more cash and everything is digital, it's all about effort. And policy was also a major talking point there. So I think I'll make policy number four.
All right, quite a myriad there. And I must say the panel title itself is quite a telling one in terms of the conversations that this must have generated as you went. Now, Agnes Callamard argued, from what we know about this panel, that leaders like Donald Trump show how authoritarian tendencies can take hold, even in mature democracies. Now, in the context of day one at the World Economic Forum 2026, how should analysts read Trump's posture amid calls for a renewed spirit of dialogue?
Trump's posture is unfortunately one of economic weaponization, and we're going to get to France in a moment. I heard, that's part of the headlines. That's just what, barely how many hours ago. Prior to that, there were more tariffs that were levied. Well, at least he's threatening them on Denmark, the UK, and others as a result of Greenland. So whenever President Trump doesn't get what he wants, you get the threat of a tariff. So the way analysts are going to be looking at this, to answer your question, is through a lens of economic coercion, or if you want to use stronger language, economic arm twisting from the president, because the United States is the biggest economy in the world. It has the largest capital market. What are you going to do? You need that market. And so he's using these economic weaponization to coerce them. And in terms of the theme here in Davos, that's the reason why there's been a bit of cynicism, because dialogue doesn't seem to be working. But what can you do? You have to keep pushing. You have to keep the effort up. But analysts are going to frame this within the lens of economic arm twisting.
Right, certainly, Rotus. And of course, this is, a really good way to segue into trade and talking about France. Of course, we saw Trump, as I mentioned earlier in my read, that Trump has threatened a 200% tariff on French wines and champagnes to pressure Emmanuel Macron into backing his proposed Board of Peace. Now, would you say that this trade coercion is a sign of an authoritarian-style strategy or simply hard-nosed geopolitics? What's the feel on ground over there?
Well, so he's here tomorrow, and my goodness, Arise News is we're going to try to get in that room, and we're going to try to get a word from the president if we can, because we want to ask him, of course, about Nigeria, whether or not he's still speaking with the Nigerian government about trying to eradicate terrorism in the the northern part of Nigeria if more strikes are happening. So we're trying to get a word with President Trump if possible. So yes. With respect to the answer to your question, it could be both. It could be, hard-nosed geopolitics and, of course, authoritarianism in terms of it's the B word, bully. He's essentially trying to bully these nations to another B word, bend to his will. So that's the frame to look at it. I should point out for our viewers, just a reminder, with all this talk of tariffs left and right, the Supreme Court of the United States, they've been teasing us since last week. We thought we were going to, or 2 weeks ago, we thought we were going to get a decision on those tariffs, whether they're legal or not. They didn't give it to us 2 weeks ago on Friday. We thought we'd get it the following Wednesday. Now we're hearing the opinion could come next week. There is a possibility, at least the last time I checked Polymarket, which is a betting site, there was a 1 in 4 chance, so 25% chance that the Supreme Court sides with President Trump. So it's possible that all these tariff threats could be mute. He's going to use them to his advantage as much as possible now, but everyone should keep in mind that there's going to be breaking news one way or the other, whether they favor him or don't, from the U.S. Supreme Court on these tariffs that he's using to bludgeon countries that are supposed to be his allies, including here in Switzerland. Don't forget, Switzerland, there was a delegation that had to come from Switzerland here and go to the White House to talk to President Trump to try to reduce tariffs. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes when that Supreme Court decision is delivered, whenever that is. We'll keep our ears and noses to the ground.
Right, it's certainly quite a tug of war there, for lack of better words. But I've got to tell you, Rotus, we certainly will be keeping our eyes peeled and hoping to get that conversation with Trump tomorrow. So lots to look forward to. Many thanks, Rotus, for keeping boots on the ground as always, and I will catch up with you again later on the show.